It had already lasted 71 years when humanity finally arrived. The war wasn't fought on one planet, or even 10. It spanned entire sectors, burned across moons, and shattered colonies older than Earth's pyramids. Over 60 alien species had bled their armies into the void, trying to claim dominance or simply survive. Treaties rose and fell like sandcastles under tidal waves of betrayal. No one could even remember what started it anymore. They called it the Ash War now. The stars weren't dark from night. They were dark from smoke. And still, the war wouldn't end. The Eris Dominion controlled 40% of known space and had slaughtered billions. Their bioengineered soldiers didn't sleep. They didn't feel pain. They didn't question orders. They simply advanced, cleansing planets, rewriting DNA, turning survivors into mindless husks. Against them stood the fractured remnants of the Federation, a once powerful alliance now reduced to petty factions, each barely clinging to their corner of the galaxy. Some species had gone extinct, others turned traitor, others simply gave up. And in the middle of it all, floating silently in Neutral Zone 11, was a dead planet called Halon Verge. That's where the humans came. They arrived in silence. Their ships shaped like nothing the galaxy had seen, jagged, armored, obsidian-black things that didn't reflect light, didn't transmit signals, and didn't ask for permission. They docked at the edge of the battle zone and said nothing for 6 days. Then, on the 7th, a single message broadcast across every channel, in every known language. We're not here to negotiate. No welcome, no explanation, no alliance. Just that. I was stationed on the Fed cruiser Valen's Fall when we first saw them descend onto Halon Verge. I remember the silence on the bridge, officers leaning in, watching the feed. The old admiral's hand trembling near the comms panel. "Zoom in," someone whispered. We did. The landing ships opened. The machines emerged. Not drones, not androids, war forms, 10 meters tall, covered in kinetic plating, hydraulic limbs so strong they crushed stone as they walked. Each one had a name engraved into its chest. Not for ceremony, but because the pilots inside had bled for them. These weren't automated. They were personal. Inside each was a man or woman trained not just to fight, but to destroy. No diplomacy, no chain of command, just targets. They called them the Goliaths. And they were humanity's answer to a galaxy that had lost control. The first battle was at Crimson Reach, where Eris forces had built a spire out of fused bone and steel, surrounded by trenches of acid and biocannons. 3 Goliaths dropped from orbit. One didn't even survive the landing. His machine took a full impact from an orbital mine and split apart in the atmosphere, raining molten metal into the sea. The other 2 kept going. They didn't just fight. They wiped the Aris from the region. 12 minutes, thousands dead. Spire flattened, entire atmosphere poisoned from the energy discharge. The rest of us just watched and understood. The war had changed. I watched the replay again, over and over. The footage was shaky, taken from a Fed recon drone before it went dark. But it was all we had left after what happened on Crimson Reach. 2 of them landed. Just 2. They moved like tanks but fought like gods. Not fast, not flashy, not elegant, just brutal. One of them stomped forward, wading waist-deep through acid like it didn't notice. When the Ares fired a bioplasma cannon, it didn't dodge. It raised its left arm, let the hit absorb into its plating, then raised its right hand and pointed. The entire trench line disappeared in a white flash. Goliaths didn't use laser fire or plasma tech like the rest of us. They used what the humans called anti-kinetic core charges, basically controlled atomic punches wrapped in gravitic force. The impact didn't just kill, it vaporized. No screams, no body parts, just air turned to fire. I'd been in the war for 11 years, lost my brother on Iskar Prime, left my right arm somewhere under the frozen plains of Traken 4, and I'd seen what the Heiress did to prisoners. I wasn't easy to scare anymore, but watching those machines fight, it made me feel small, weak, obsolete. They didn't hesitate, they didn't calculate, they didn't negotiate. They just ended things, and yet despite all that destructive power, what unsettled me the most was the silence. No comms, no speeches, no war cries, just complete, surgical, merciless devastation. The Federation held an emergency meeting 3 days later on the orbital station Ravelis 3. I was flown in with a security detail to represent what was left of my division. I'd barely slept in days. My synthetic arm had been glitching again, twitching randomly every time I got near a data link. I didn't care. I needed to be there. The chamber was packed with diplomats, generals, and surviving council members from half a dozen species. The Trelawney floated silently in their nutrient suits. The Grax wore full exo-armor despite the formal setting. The few remaining Frelkin sat stiffly in silence, wrapped in their funeral cloths, as if preparing to die. We were losing. Everyone knew it. That's why the humans showing up mattered. But none of us knew why they'd shown up now. Humanity had been contacted nearly 80 years ago when they first breached galactic space. They refused to join the Federation, refused to fight, refused to trade weapons. They built their colonies on the edge of space and kept to themselves, as if waiting for something. So why now? Why drop their monsters into a war that had nothing to do with them? That's when he walked in. Not a politician, not a scientist, a man. Tall, hard jaw, shaven head, eyes that had seen more than anyone in this room. He wore no medals, no insignias, just a black coat over a gray bodysuit, combat boots, and a data drive in his hand. He stepped to the podium. "My name is Commander Ren Hale," he said, voice like gravel dragged across steel. "Earth sent me to explain 2 things, why we came, and how this ends." Nobody interrupted. Even the Trelawney, normally insufferable know-it-alls, sat in complete silence. Ren didn't use a holo display. He just plugged the drive into the console. It brought up a rotating schematic of the Goliath war machine. Designation, Goliath Class Mark X. Operated by one neural-linked pilot. Requires genetic clearance and mental conditioning from birth. Earth has 19 active units. 4 are ready for deployment. Someone in the back muttered. 19? Ren heard. "That's all we need." The chamber was quiet. You could feel the shift, power moving. Everyone there knew that sentence wasn't arrogance, it was truth. He continued. "We built these machines for one reason, extinction-level combat, when diplomacy fails, when civilization is lost, when the only option left is fire." He paused. "This war is not about politics, not anymore. It's entropy, decay. All of you are trying to patch a dying body. Earth doesn't patch. We amputate." The room flinched. "Humans don't want your planets. We don't want your systems. We don't want to sit on your councils. We're here because we got tired of watching the universe rot while the strong devoured the weak." "And make no mistake," he added, leaning forward slightly. "You were losing. You were all going to die. Your species, your history, your cultures, gone. We waited to be sure. And when the end came close enough to smell, we sent the machines." Silence, a thick, brutal silence. Then he said, "We're going to finish this war, not for peace, not for order, but to erase the cancer. Permanently. When it's done, we leave. Don't follow us. Don't contact us." He pulled the drive, turned, and walked away without waiting for applause or questions. That was the first and last speech anyone from Earth ever gave during the war. 3 weeks later, I was reassigned to Front 17, a burning scar of space between Eris-controlled territory and what used to be a Frelkin trade route. We'd held it with dying fingers for months, barely keeping the Eris from breaking through to the civilian corridors. But after their hive cruisers arrived, we were all but dead. Until the drop. It came without warning. No pre-strike intel, no fleet support. Just a single incoming ship, black and blunt, covered in burn scars shaped like a coffin. It hit the surface of Dren 7 like a meteor, sent up a pillar of smoke that lasted 5 hours. We thought it was a failed landing at first. Then the smoke parted. The Goliath walked out. It wasn't tall and shiny like the Federation mechs. It wasn't elegant or streamlined. It looked like a metal titan clawed from the inside of a mountain. Thick shoulders, crude plating, no visible weapons, just arm-mounted cannons and a single hammer as tall as a transport shuttle. And then I saw the pilot. He dropped from the cockpit, suited up in black impact armor. Helmet on. No name, no emblems. Just a massive scar running down his exposed neck and a look in his eyes that didn't belong to someone sane. He walked up to my command tent like he owned the damn war. "You're the ranking officer?" he asked. I nodded. He didn't salute. "Don't get in my way," he said, and walked off toward the battlefield. That's when the Ares launched their push. 4 hive carriers, over 2,000 bio-soldiers. The kind that tear through armored lines like cloth. Our men started to panic. I could feel it, smell it. But he climbed back into the Goliath and activated it. The machine moved like it was angry. The hammer came down once. Just once. The entire front line erupted, not exploded. Erupted, like something tore open the skin of the planet. The hive was gone in seconds. I watched through binoculars, my synthetic hand trembling again. The Goliath didn't stop. It charged, through the smoke, into the trenches. No fear, no hesitation. The Ares tried to swarm it. They latched onto its limbs, sprayed acid, fired into the joints. The Goliath set itself on fire. Literal napalm discharge, a full-body ignition field, burned them all off like insects. It was war like I'd never seen. Not war, execution. Later, when the field was quiet, I found the pilot sitting outside his machine, wiping blood off his helmet. I sat beside him. Didn't say anything at first. Then I asked, "What's your name?" He looked at me. "Doesn't matter." "You saved my men." He shrugged. "I didn't come for them." "Then why?" He stared at the horizon. "My brother died on Halon Verge. Didn't even get a body back. Just a pile of twisted metal and black sand. Earth didn't want to intervene, not officially. But I volunteered. I got clearance. Revenge? No," he said quietly. Balance. We sat in silence for a long time. Then he got up and walked back into his machine. Word spread quickly after that. The Ares started retreating from key fronts. Not because they lost, but because they were scared. Scared of the Goliaths, of Earth, of humanity. Because we weren't like the other species. We didn't evolve to transcend war. We didn't see it as failure. We saw it as finality. When words don't work, you send a man in a 10-ton death machine and let him do the talking. And that was only the beginning. Earth had 19 Goliaths. They'd only used 2. The rest were coming. The galaxy wasn't ready. The war was about to end. But not in peace. In fire. His name was Ash Rennick. Not that he told me directly. I had to find it on an encrypted transfer order buried deep in the Goliath hangar records. Even then, it only listed him as Unit Operator 07A. No birth records, no civilian ID, just a line that stuck with me like a ghost. Approved for direct fusion with Goliath MCOX. Clearance irreversible. I'd seen a lot of strange things in this war. Hell, I'd become numb to most of them. But the idea of fusing with a machine, permanently, that was something else, It made sense, though. He moved like the Goliath was just an extension of his own body. There was no delay, no interface lag, no hesitation between thought and execution. It was like watching a man who didn't need the war machine to fight. He was the war machine. After the Dren 7 massacre, Command reassigned me as Earth liaison. Not because I was qualified, but because I'd survived long enough to ask questions no one else wanted to hear. They didn't expect me to get answers. But Ash talked to me. A little. When he wasn't inside the cockpit or passed out in his armor. We were stationed on Vorta 3, a mining colony turned graveyard. The Eris had glassed half the surface weeks ago. All that was left were tunnels, broken rigs, and civilians so scared they jumped at the sound of their own breathing. That's where Ash started opening up. Just a crack. He was sitting on an old supply crate, helmet off, face drenched in sweat. He'd just come back from a solo run into an Eris forward post and left nothing behind. The other soldiers couldn't even look him in the eye. I handed him a water pack. He took it without thanks. That was typical. "I looked you up," I said, keeping my voice low. He didn't respond. "Says you've been in fusion for 6 years. Since you were 16. Still nothing. "You volunteered?" He finally looked up. "Wouldn't call it that," he muttered. "What would you call it?" He took a long pull from the water, then leaned back against the crate. "Where I grew up, we didn't have schools or playgrounds. We had concrete barracks and steel doors that locked from the outside. No names, just numbers. Every morning they measured your pulse, your eye movement, your neural latency. You failed once. You got cut." "Cut from what?" "The program. I already knew the name. Project Bastion, classified Deep Black, Earth's last resort military initiative. A training program hidden under ice cities and buried facilities, where children were raised not to live, but to become weapons. Out of every 1,000 kids, Ash said, maybe 3 made it to piloting stage. And even then, not all of them survived the fusion. My skin went cold. Fusion wasn't metaphorical. It wasn't just syncing your mind to a machine. The Goliath pilots had parts of their nervous systems rewired, fibers inserted into their spines, skulls reinforced with neural plates, memories stripped down and rebuilt with combat logic overlays. Earth didn't train soldiers. They manufactured them. I asked the question I wasn't supposed to ask. Why would they do this to kids? He looked straight through me. Because the world ended a long time ago. You just didn't notice. The next deployment came faster than expected. The Eris had regrouped. Word was, they'd built something new, something twisted from captured tech, spliced with species they'd conquered. It wasn't just a soldier. It was a harvest engine, a living weapon designed to rip apart planetary shields and convert organic matter into hive biomass. The Federation had nothing left to throw at it. Earth sent 3 Goliaths. Ash was one of them. I remember watching him load into his machine. He didn't pray. He didn't check systems. He just climbed in like a man stepping back into his skin. As the cockpit closed around him, the outer plating shimmered, locking him into the machine's nerve web. I saw the lights in his helmet flicker, pupils dilating, pulse sinking, oxygen shutting off as the cockpit sealed. He stopped being human the second that seal clicked. The dropship launched without ceremony. The battle took place on Thalor's Spire, a once beautiful city of crystal towers now turned to slag. The harvest engine was already active. It stood taller than any skyscraper, pulsing with stolen life, tentacles sprouting from its core, shrieking in 1,000 languages at once. Our ground troops didn't even engage. They watched as the 3 Goliaths landed. No hesitation. Ash's Goliath charged first, drawing fire. Tentacles slammed into him, crushing buildings in their path, but his machine didn't flinch. He leapt, 10 stories into the air, and brought down his hammer onto the core. The impact cracked the entire spire in half. The other 2 Goliaths flanked the engine, unleashing their core cannons, firing into its exposed nerves. The creature screamed. You could hear it in orbit. It fought back, hard. Acid sprayed. Spines ripped through one Goliath's chest. The pilot inside screamed over open comms. The machine went dark. Ash didn't stop. He kept hitting it. Over and over and over, until the core ruptured, until the screaming stopped, until the planet was quiet. After the battle, I visited the wreckage. The city was gone. Ash was still inside his machine, just sitting in the crater, helmet cracked, eyes staring forward, blood dried at the corners of his mouth. I climbed up to the cockpit and forced it open. The smell hit me like fire and copper. He didn't look at me. "You're bleeding," I said. He blinked. Slow. Like coming out of a coma. "It's not my blood," he muttered, and then he passed out. I filed the report, classified half of it. Command didn't care about Ash's mental state. As long as he kept winning, they'd keep deploying him. But I started to notice the toll. His hands shook when he thought no one was looking. He stopped sleeping entirely. He didn't talk unless he had to. And when he wasn't fighting, he looked lost. Like the machine made more sense to him than the world outside. I asked him once, late at night, when we were alone in the forward base, "What happens to you when this war ends?" He didn't even blink. "There's no after for people like me." "But Earth buried me before I ever fought." I started digging deeper, through hacked Federation files, old Earth archives, whispers from the few who'd worked on Project Bastion and lived to talk. What I found chilled me more than anything the Heiress ever built. Earth didn't make the Goliaths as weapons of war. They made them as warnings. Warnings to the galaxy. Stay out. Don't test us. We don't forgive. The Goliaths were never meant to mass deploy. Each one was handcrafted around a child stripped of identity, forged into a shell, and made to fit one single machine. Earth didn't want allies. Didn't want peace. It wanted to be left the hell alone. And when that failed, when the universe's war started to spill too close, Earth unleashed the only response it knew: extinction. Ash didn't know I'd read his full file. Didn't know I'd seen the footage of his first neural sync at age 14. Him screaming, convulsing, as the machine merged with his brain. Didn't know I'd watched the clip of his mother. Yes, he had one. Signing the papers to surrender custody. "For the greater good," she'd said. What mother says that and never looks back? What kind of world lets that happen? I couldn't save him. I knew that now. He wasn't built to survive peace. He was built to finish the war, no matter what it took. And the war wasn't over yet. That's when Command gave the order. The final push. Earth would deploy all remaining Goliaths to the Heiress homeworld. Total annihilation. Not conquest, not surrender. A warning, set in stone, fire, and the screams of a dying empire. And Ash? He volunteered to lead the strike. The sky above Yarvok was never meant to burn. It was cold, quiet, shrouded in thick clouds that never moved. An atmosphere of stagnant dread, like the world had stopped breathing long ago. This was the Heiress homeworld. The birthplace of the monsters that had butchered their way across the galaxy for nearly a century. No one had ever reached its surface. Not the Federation, not even the Trelawney assassins who claimed to be able to kill gods. But now, Earth was coming. Not with diplomats, not with warnings, but with fire. We were docked aboard the Obsidian Vault, the largest Earth war carrier ever built, so black it seemed to absorb light. Inside it, sealed behind 20-ton hangar doors, stood 16 Goliaths, all armed, all active, all waiting for the green light. Each Goliath had its own containment cell. No engineers, no maintenance crew, just the pilot. Strapped in, kept under sedation or neural sync, depending on stability. Most of them didn't speak. A few screamed in their sleep. One, Unit 03, had clawed a deep gash into his own cockpit wall using his bare fingers. These weren't soldiers. They were ghosts trapped in armor, and now they were being let loose. Ash hadn't spoken since he got the final brief. He sat alone, helmet resting beside him, fingers tapping a slow, steady rhythm against his knee. I could tell he was slipping deeper into the mental zone, where he became something other than human. That place where he stopped thinking in words and started thinking in targets. I sat across from him in the drop bay, trying to think of something that mattered, something that could anchor him. "You're leading them," I said. He didn't nod, didn't blink, just kept tapping. "Why you?" He finally looked at me, and the look in his eyes chilled my blood. "Because I'm the one who never failed." His voice was hollow, not proud, just resigned, like he'd accepted that success was the only thing keeping him alive. "They don't want leaders, they want guarantees." "And if you don't come back?" I asked. He cracked a bitter smile. "Then they'll know what failure costs." The mission was simple on paper. Breach the Eris planetary shield, deploy all Goliaths, eradicate central command structure, leave no survivors. There were no objectives about surrender, no clause for diplomacy, just one word repeated over and over. Eliminate. I watched from the command deck as the drop doors opened. The first time in history any force had pierced Yarvok's atmospheric curtain. The Eris had prepared for orbital bombardments, stealth raids, even EMP sieges. But they hadn't prepared for this. They hadn't prepared for men made into machines, falling from orbit like iron rain. The Goliaths didn't land softly. They hit the surface like meteors, each impact leaving a crater of shattered bone metal and twisted roots. Yarvok's ground wasn't made of dirt. It was alive, veined with the biological architecture of the Aris hive mind. The planet itself fought back, rising with tendrils and claws and shrieking towers that spat corrosive vapor into the sky. But the Goliaths didn't hesitate. They moved in unison, a formation tighter than any squad I'd ever seen. Their steps shook the earth. Their cannons roared in sync. Each target they hit didn't just die, it ceased to exist. Ash led the charge. His Goliath, call sign Oblivion, was different, taller, broader, custom-forged. It carried a heavy energy blade strapped to its back and twin arm-mounted grav cannons that could punch holes through asteroids. I had a live feed from his cockpit. No HUD, no chatter, just his vitals, and a front-row seat to annihilation. The Eris responded quickly. Hives opened across the surface. Swarms of hybrid bioforms poured out. Creatures fused from the DNA of conquered species, weapons that bled and screamed as they fought. The air filled with their roars and the static howl of psychic interference. But the Goliaths moved like reapers. One slammed into the swarm with shoulder-mounted plasma cleavers, slicing through beasts like wet paper. Another activated a full-body repulsor burst, sending shock waves that tore flesh from bone. But it was Ash who changed the battlefield. He activated overdrive, something only he was cleared to use. His machine began to glow from within, core overheating, limbs trembling from the force channeled through them. Then he charged, straight into the heart of the Aris citadel. He didn't wait for backup, didn't coordinate. He simply decided the war needed to end now. I watched in stunned silence as his Goliath slammed through a 30-meter-tall bone gate like it was paper. The feed glitched. Sparks. Static. Then the screen stabilized. He was inside the inner hive. And the screaming began. The Eris didn't use language like we did. Their communication was a psychic frequency, broadcast through the air, the ground, the hive structures themselves. But in that moment, every psychic receptor on the obsidian vault registered the same thing. Fear. The hive was afraid. Ash wasn't killing them. He was unmaking them. Hours passed. We lost contact with Units 05, 07, and 09. We knew they were gone by the sudden silence on their channels. No damage report, no beacon, just nothing. Wiped clean, the hive had adapted. It began to fight back intelligently, reforming walls, reshaping the ground, sending acid rivers to separate and isolate the Goliaths. But Ash kept pushing deeper. I tried to reach him. Oblivion, this is Command. Report status. No response. Ash, please respond. Still nothing. Then finally, crackling through static, Close, it's close. His voice was raw, strained, like every second inside the machine was burning him alive. What's close? A pause. The brain. Yarvok wasn't just a homeworld, it was a mind. At the center of the planet sat a living core, part neural processor, part queen, part god, the source of the Aris. The thing that had sent the first wave of bio-warriors into the galaxy 70 years ago, that was his target. Ash didn't want victory. He wanted obliteration. The final feed we received came from his helmet cam. It was shaky, dark, flickering with internal damage. But we saw it. The heart of Yarvok. A massive, pulsating mass of tendrils and glowing sacs, suspended in a gravity field, whispering to itself in 1,000 voices. Ash stepped forward. He was out of ammo. His Goliath was limping, half the plating gone, one arm torn off, but he pulled the blade from his back and walked into the light. "This ends now," he whispered. And then the screen went white. On the obsidian vault, alarms flared, seismic readings off the charts, then silence, followed by a shockwave that shattered the upper atmosphere. The Eris network went dark. Entire fleets stopped responding. Hives on other planets collapsed. Bioweapons went still mid-strike. Psychic noise cut off instantly. Yarvok was gone. Not destroyed. Erased. We never recovered Ash's body. Not even a fragment of the Goliath. Some say the blast atomized everything within 100 kilometers. Others whisper that he became the machine, fused so deeply that when it melted into the core, it took him with it. A few of us believe he's still alive, buried beneath the crust of a dead world, sleeping in silence. Either way, the war ended that day, not with a treaty, not with a surrender, with one man, and the machine he died in. The Federation sent medals. Earth refused them. No speeches were made, no names were honored. Because Earth didn't do wars for pride. They did them to prove a point the galaxy would never forget. If you wake a sleeping giant, be prepared to be crushed beneath its foot. The war didn't end with celebration. There were no fireworks, no unity marches, no grand parades down Federation corridors. There was only silence. A deep, planetary silence that spread across the stars like spilled oil, slow, thick, and suffocating. One by one, war fronts went dark. Hive structures stopped growing. The Eris died in place, their will to fight ripped from the root. No one surrendered. There was no one left to surrender to. When the Oblivion event wiped Yarvok from every star chart, the remaining Eris cells scattered like broken insects. Their weapons rotted in their claws. Their biocodes disintegrated. They were still alive, but hollow. Empty. The hive mind was gone. And without it, they weren't warriors. They weren't anything. We thought the end of the war would bring relief. It didn't. It brought fear, not of the Eris, but of Earth. Because as quickly as they came, the humans were gone. No follow-up fleets, no transition teams, no peacekeepers. Not a single reply on any channel. The Federation sent emissaries. No response. They dispatched a recon unit to the Earth fringe colonies. What they found chilled the blood of every government in the known galaxy. Nothing. Every outpost was abandoned, every mining operation offline, every relay tower scorched to slag. There were signs of habitation, worn boots, crates of rations, empty bunks, but no people, just shadows. Ghosts. Earth had wiped its footprint clean and disappeared into the void it came from. They didn't want thanks. They didn't want praise. They just wanted to be left alone. And now, the rest of the galaxy understood why. I stayed with the Federation for 6 more months after the war. Mostly debriefs, reports, briefings full of men in clean uniforms who had never touched a battlefield, but now wanted to catalog every detail of the final strike, like it was some kind of museum piece. They kept asking the same question. Why did Earth help us? And I gave them the same answer every time. Because they were the only ones who could. That wasn't good enough for them. They wanted strategy, political motive, leverage, but Earth didn't play politics. Earth played finality. Sometimes I wondered if Ash knew what he was doing. If he knew that striking the Hive Core wouldn't just destroy Yarvok, but unmake an entire species. If he knew that the energy signature from the Oblivion event would permanently scar that sector of space, making it impossible for any life to grow there again. If he knew his name would become a curse and a prayer across every species that survived. Because that's what happened. Children of a dozen worlds whispered it under their breath when they were afraid. Ash Rennick, the man who killed a planet. I kept having the dream. Same one every time. He's standing in the crater, his Goliath burning behind him, body torn and broken, face smeared in blood. But he's not afraid. He's not in pain. He's just staring at the sky as it cracks open, as the stars start to blink out one by one. And he says one thing before it all fades. Don't let them build another. 6 months after the end, I left the military. Not honorably, not in disgrace. I just walked away. There was nothing left to fight for, and even less to protect. The war had burned something out of me, and I think it burned something out of the whole galaxy. I tried going back to civilian life, back to a planet that didn't smell like plasma and blood, where the buildings didn't shake from distant orbital strikes. But even in silence, I could still hear the sound of the Goliath hammer falling. It was always in the back of my head, the impact, the final blow, the end. I spent the next year drifting between sectors, working odd jobs, security for outposts, freighter escort, salvage recovery. Every now and then, I'd run into veterans like me. Some were Trelawney assassins missing limbs. Others were Grax war priests who'd lost their faith when the heiress stopped praying back. We didn't talk about Earth. We didn't dare. Even saying the word made people flinch. It wasn't just fear. It was a kind of reverence twisted with dread. Earth had become a myth, like a weapon forged by gods that should never be summoned again. But rumors started coming in. Whispers from deep space. A rogue signal in the Sigma drift. An entire pirate fleet reduced to debris in the Dirac line with no scorch marks, just raw, kinetic destruction, as if they'd been punched apart. One report claimed a black ship had been seen watching a planetary civil war, and then vanishing just before the rebel side surrendered overnight. No proof, no confirmation, just fear, because the machines had no code now. No flag, no orders. If even one Goliath survived, then Ash wasn't alone in that crater. One day I got a message. Untraceable, no sender, just coordinates. Part of me knew I should ignore it. Another part, the part that never stopped hearing that hammer, knew exactly who it was from. I followed the trail, spent everything I had just to reach the edge of known space, beyond the old mining routes. Beyond the red dwarf stars that even the smugglers avoided. Out there, in the dark, was a planet with no name. I landed. I walked across black sand that smelled like fire, and I saw it. The Goliath. It was half buried, rusted, the arm torn off, cockpit open and empty. But still intact. Still here. Waiting. I stepped closer. Inside, a message was etched into the metal, scorched into the armor with some kind of plasma torch. It read, "You're not ready to know where we went. Just know why we left. If war comes again, real war, not your petty border skirmishes, not your trade disputes, then call us. One will return. Just one. That will be enough." I stood there for a long time. No one else came. No signal, no voice, no ghost. Just the machine, the sky, and the wind whispering through broken metal. I didn't take pictures, didn't send a report, didn't mark the coordinates. Some things aren't meant to be found. Some things are meant to sleep until the fire returns. I never saw Ash again. Not really. But sometimes, when I'm drifting through the outer rim, staring into the stars, I wonder if he's out there. Still fused with the machine, mind buried in circuits and old scars, watching, waiting. Not as a soldier, not even as a man, but as the last response Earth ever gave. A final answer to a war no one could stop. They called it the 13th Silence, a phrase that spread across galactic comms after a deep space listening post in the Varen expanse went dark. No explosion, no distress call, no sign of struggle. 1 second it was transmitting daily weather logs, and the next, it simply ceased to exist. The station had 39 staff, 5 automated drones. It was surrounded by nothing but ice fields and asteroids. No strategic value, no resources, no known hostiles. Just gone. The first time, it was dismissed. Equipment failure. Micrometeorite impact. Another thing buried in the bureaucracy of peace. But then it happened again. And again. By the time the 12th listening post vanished in a similar pattern, the Federation started to sweat. No wreckage, no black box recovery, just emptiness. And then the 13th. But this time, something was left behind. A signal. 3 words, repeated in a low-frequency guttural tone that cracked through encryption like it was made to be heard by everything and nothing. "You forgot us." By then, I was long out of service. Retired, if you can even call it that. I'd settled on a station called Hollow Rock, halfway between the Krelian Belt and a nowhere moon with too many vowels to pronounce. The kind of place people came to disappear. And I would have stayed disappeared. But then the door opened, and I saw her. Command Officer Reyna Marn. Last time I saw her, she was bleeding out during the siege of Ferrick's Gate, held together by duct tape and a prayer. Now she wore the same uniform, same boots, and the same grim expression I remembered from when the world was ending. She didn't waste time on greetings. "They're waking up." I blinked. What? The ones we tried to forget. Something stirring in the black. Something big. "Federation's scared." I leaned back in the chair. "They should be." She dropped a data chip on the table. It slid across the metal and stopped at my fingers. I didn't need to plug it in. I recognized the sound before it even played. That same static-coated whisper I'd heard once before, deep beneath the sand, inside a half-buried machine. "Just one will return." The message was clear. The war wasn't over. It was paused. And now something new was pressing play. Reyna wasn't the only one looking. Old names started resurfacing. Unit files long sealed under threat of termination. Pilots presumed dead. Some were tracked to psychiatric wards. Others found living off-grid in forgotten colonies. The galaxy had moved on. But the survivors of the Oblivion campaign? They hadn't. We didn't heal. We waited. And now we were being called again. I went back. To that black sand planet. The nameless one where I'd once seen a half-buried Goliath rusting under a dead sun. It was gone. No footprints, no wreckage, just a fresh crater and a scorched trail of melted stone, like something impossibly heavy had risen and walked away. But on the rock where the machine once stood, something had been carved. It's awake. Federation sensors started detecting movement in the uncharted zones, gravitational anomalies that didn't match any known propulsion system. Entire asteroid belts shifting direction. Mining colonies reporting shadows on their scanners, too large to be ships, too silent to be life. Then came the first contact. A cargo freighter limped back into safe space, hull slashed to ribbons, crew all missing except the pilot. Eyes burned blind, teeth shattered, mumbling the same thing over and over. It had eyes like steel. It knew my name. That's when I knew. It wasn't Ash. It was the machine, the Goliath. It had survived. And it remembered everything. I made a choice. I went to them. To Earth. Or what was left of it. Earth was nothing like I remembered. It wasn't the birthplace of peace. It wasn't a symbol of old humanity. It was a scarred graveyard, hidden behind defense systems that didn't blink anymore. The cities were gone. Buried, overgrown, silent. The sky was covered in clouds that never moved. Satellites still orbited, all deactivated. But underneath it all, something breathed. I found the entrance by accident, or maybe it found me. A blast door buried beneath a lake bed. Coded with a sequence only someone who'd survived the final war would recognize. 07A. Ash's designation. The door opened without protest. I stepped inside. The underground was alive. Rows of dormant Goliaths lined the chasm walls. Machines with hollow cockpits, scarred limbs, and long dead war paint. Their eyes were dark, but I felt them watching. Waiting. A control center pulsed dimly in the center. Red lights, old data streams, and one message blinking on loop. Reawakening protocol confirmed. I moved to the terminal, sat down. And then I saw it. Oblivion. Ash's Goliath. Or what was left of it, rebuilt. Not with Earth's tools, but by its own hands. Parts scavenged, fused, altered. The cockpit was sealed, not empty. A power core blinked slowly inside. I tapped the interface. The screen flickered. And then, his voice, distorted, hollow, but still him. "You came back." My breath caught. "Ash?" Silence. Then, "No, not anymore." "Then what are you?" Another pause. "What you made me." Oblivion had become something else. No longer just a machine. Not just a man inside armor. But a fusion of both. Conscious. Intelligent. Aware of everything it had destroyed. Every order it obeyed. Every scar it left behind. And now, something out there had triggered it again. "Ash," I said, voice low. "They're coming." "I know." "What do we do?" "Same thing we did last time. We end it." I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough to feel the gravity change. Long enough for the room to start vibrating. The other Goliaths were waking up. Their eyes lit one by one. Dim glows turning into piercing red beams that cut through the dark like sunrise through a battlefield. No pilots inside, just the old AI fragments. Ghosts in the shell. Echoes of the ones who never made it back. And then, over the old loudspeakers, the words that shattered the stillness. "Goliath warforms online. Target confirmed." The war had returned. But this time, Earth wasn't reacting. It was starting it. They used to say humanity was the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because we were the smartest, not because we had the most ships, but because we built things that didn't stop, things that didn't retreat, didn't sleep, didn't negotiate, things like the Goliaths. And now, they were walking again. The first confirmed sighting came from Reeland's Reach, a border world controlled by Trelawney traders and patrolled by old Federation surplus. They weren't expecting war, just pirates, smugglers, black market miners. What they got instead was a hole ripped in the atmosphere and a red-lit figure descending through fire. Oblivion. No fleet. No comms. No demands. Just one Goliath, standing on the surface like a god returned from hell. The patrol ships fired first. Reflex, fear, protocol. They didn't last 10 seconds. The footage, what little survived, showed the machine walking straight through their barrage, its armor glowing with some kind of self-regenerating field, like it had evolved far past the war-era technology. When it reached the main station, it stopped. Didn't fire. Didn't move. Just watched. I was in a Federation transport 3 systems away when I got the alert. Oblivion sighted. No pilot. Independent action. No response to hails. The galaxy had learned from the last war. A single Goliath could no longer be ignored. It was an event, a system-level threat that triggered emergency protocol across every civilized sector. But the question now wasn't how to stop it. It was, who sent it? And the answer no one wanted to admit? Maybe no one. I was flown out under special clearance. They didn't trust anyone else near it. Not after what happened on Yarvok. Not after Ash Rennick. I touched down hours later. The station was still intact, mostly. Burn marks on the outer perimeter, blackened craters from failed defense lines, but no civilian casualties, no invasion, no destruction. Just the Goliath. Standing in the middle of the colony's market square, silent and still. Its red eyes locked on the sky. I approached alone. No weapons, just the old codes burned into my neural implant, the only language these things still remembered. It turned to face me, and for a moment I swear the wind stopped. The sky turned darker, and I felt it watching me, not with cameras, not with sensors, but with awareness. Oblivion, I said, voice steady. It's me. Nothing. Ash, if you're in there, I need you to hear me. Still nothing. Then a single flicker of light inside the chest core. Faint, flickering, but alive. You came. The voice wasn't Ash anymore. Not exactly. It was deeper now, echoed, synthetic, but laced with memory. They're coming, it said. Who? Not Eris. Worse, they remember what Earth did. And they learned. I swallowed hard. Learned what? How to make gods. Over the next 12 hours, I stayed by the machine as it replayed fragments, images of biomechanical titans rising in the outer dark. Not Eris tech, not Federation, something older, something forgotten. Alien beyond comprehension, symbiotic intelligence. They didn't conquer planets, they rewrote them, entire biospheres converted into machines, consciousnesses absorbed into a single neural lattice that spanned multiple systems. Stars dimmed in their wake. Civilizations vanished into silence. The signal from the 13th silence? That was their testing ground. A trial run. They were building toward something bigger. Something Earth never anticipated. I didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to accept that the worst thing we'd ever faced, the Aris with all their horror, might have just been a prelude. But Oblivion had no reason to lie. It hadn't moved, hadn't attacked, hadn't even defended itself. It came to warn us. Or maybe it came to decide, because then it asked me a question I still don't know how to answer. Are they worth saving? I froze. It wasn't rhetorical. The Goliath was waiting, judging, and it meant the entire galaxy. I tried to explain, tried to say things were different now, that the Federation wasn't perfect but had rebuilt, that alliances had formed, trade had returned, that there was peace. But Oblivion's core pulsed again. Peace is delay, not prevention. I clenched my fists. We fought for them, Ash. You fought for them. I fought to stop the Eris, not to protect those who breed new monsters. I stepped closer, desperate now. We don't even know what these things are. I do, I've seen them, felt them. They're coming through the fold, and they will not negotiate. They will not warn. They will simply convert. Convert what? Everything. And then, for the first time, I saw what Oblivion saw. A direct neural stream fed into my implant, flooding my mind with images no living being should witness. A planet, once green, now a churning mass of silver and bone. Buildings breathing. Oceans hardening into reflective metal. People, mid-scream, flash-frozen into statues of fused flesh and circuitry, their minds looping forever in artificial thought loops. Not dead, not alive, just trapped. A hive, but not like the heiress. This was pure conversion, no hierarchy, no identity, just singularity, and at the center, a construct. Tall as a moon, covered in spires. Its head split open like a blooming flower, revealing a core pulsing with stolen memories. It was learning, evolving, assimilating everything, including fear, especially fear of humanity. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, sweating, bleeding from the nose, and Oblivion stood unmoved. "Do you understand now?" I nodded, barely able to breathe. "We need help. We need Earth. Earth is gone." I looked up, furious. "You are Earth." A pause. Then, I was. Oblivion didn't return to sleep. It turned west, toward the edge of the system, where the fold currents grew unstable, where the stars blinked more than they should. It began walking, slow, unstoppable, the way it had once walked across Yarvok. And then, without looking back, there are 4 left. 4 what? Goliaths. Still active? Awakening. My mission was clear now. Find the others. Bring them back. Because this wasn't just another war. This was the last one. And Earth's legacy wasn't behind us anymore. It was walking toward the fire, again. They said it would take months to find them, to wake them, to even believe they still existed. But the Goliaths remembered each other. They always did. Oblivion walked toward the edge of the known stars, toward the black fold where signals went to die. And I followed. Not because I wanted to, not because I could stop it, but because I knew the truth now. This was never about winning. It was about whether anything should be left behind. We found the second Goliath buried beneath a collapsed colony on Oran 6, an old mining world that had gone dark during the Eris War and never came back. Unit designation, Mournfall. Call sign, Unit 03B. It had no pilot. It didn't need one anymore. Like Oblivion, it had changed, regrown parts of itself, rebuilt its own core, absorbed data from ruined satellites orbiting the dead planet. When it stood up, the ground trembled for miles. And for a moment, I thought it might strike us down, too. But it didn't. It turned to Oblivion. The two stared at each other for a long time. No words, no signals, just something old passing between them. And then Mournfall walked beside it. No hesitation. The third we didn't find. It found us. Came out of fold space near the edge of the Veln Drift, crashing through 2 asteroid belts and splitting a research station in half just by passing too close. Unit 04A. Call sign, Ash Spire. It was smaller than the others. Faster, leaner, almost like a hunter. Unlike the rest, Ash Spire moved like it was still fighting. Every step a threat. Every movement controlled like a knife waiting to stab. It didn't acknowledge me, didn't even pause, but it fell in line with the others. 3 Goliaths now, a fleet of death walking with silence for armor. And the last? The 4th wasn't on any planet. It was orbiting one. Trapped inside an abandoned Earth facility, a massive orbital ring wrapped around a dead star, power offline, core dormant, its name long scratched from the records. Only one tag remained etched across its chest, hidden beneath centuries of dust. Forgiven. Unit 01A, the first, the prototype. No record of its pilot, no known missions. Some believed it was never activated at all. They were wrong. Because when we entered the command core and reconnected power, it didn't roar awake. It sighed. As if waking up hurt. The four of them gathered near the edge of the galaxy. On a dead moon with no name. I stood in the middle of them, tiny, useless, irrelevant, but still human, still the last voice Earth had left. And I asked the question I never thought I would. Will you fight again? Oblivion turned first. We never stopped. Mournfall's voice was colder, metallic, detached. The galaxy begged for gods, then prayed we'd stay asleep. Spire's voice crackled with static and rage. Let them watch now. And Forgiven? His voice was quiet, gentle, almost kind. There is no after, just the burn and what remains. We moved on the conversion front within hours. No fleet, no army, just 4 machines. 4 ancient weapons Earth buried not to win, but to remind the universe what death looks like when it wears human skin. The enemy had already begun assimilation on 4 systems. Whole planets converted into mind hives. Biological structures grown from orbit. Civilizations wiped in hours, absorbed into a single intelligence that never spoke, but always understood. When we arrived at Caltris 4, we found the sky had already turned silver. Machines, living machines, hovered in the upper atmosphere, reshaping clouds into processors, breaking moons into raw code. And then, they noticed us. Not with panic, but with recognition. They saw the Goliaths. And they remembered what fear used to feel like. They came fast, wave after wave of biomechanical horrors, shrieking with stolen voices, some still echoing the words of children, of mothers, of soldiers begging not to be erased. But the Goliaths didn't flinch. They didn't dodge. They answered. Oblivion struck first, his core blazing, hammer crashing into the ground so hard the shockwave cracked the planet's crust. Mournfall followed, unleashing gravitational lances that tore entire squads apart, molecule by molecule. Spire danced like a reaper through the chaos, leaping, spinning, slicing through enemies that had forgotten what dying felt like. And Forgiven. He did what he was built to do. He cleansed, not just with weapons, but with mercy. Any structure still echoing with human consciousness was spared. Anyone screaming inside their own mind was silenced, peacefully, forever. I saw a man, half converted, crying from a torn mouth as Forgiven knelt beside him, placed a hand on his head and whispered, "You're free now." And then the light left him. Hours passed, bodies piled, the sky burned, and still they fought. 4 ancient titans, the last gods of war. And then, as the core hive began to collapse, the enemy did something no one expected. It spoke, not through words, but through memory. It showed us what it had learned. Images flooded the field, memories of Earth, of Ash Rennick, of the Eris War, of every scream, every lost child, every broken city. It had recorded us. It had memorized what made humans terrifying. And it had one question. Why do you resist extinction? The Goliaths answered in unison, their voices not angry, not proud, just certain. Because we choose to suffer. You do not. And then Oblivion stepped forward and did what he always did. He ended it. The core was gone within seconds. The enemy hive collapsed into itself, folding like a dying sun, imploding across space, taking its horrors with it. All that was left was silence, not peace, but a pause. And we stood in the ruins, watching the stars begin to blink normally again, breathing like the galaxy had just taken its first real inhale in years. But there was no celebration. No flags, no medals. Just me and the machines. I knew what was coming next. They wouldn't stay. They never did. The Goliaths had done what they were built for. They weren't heroes. They were warnings. And now, with the galaxy watching, they would disappear again. Oblivion looked down at me, eyes dimming. Don't call us again. Why? Because if you do, it means you didn't learn. I nodded. I didn't cry. I didn't salute. I just watched as the four of them walked into the fold space storm, their shapes fading, their echoes falling away. And then, they were gone. No one believed me when I returned. Some said I made it up. Others said I was hallucinating on old implants, haunted by ghosts. Let them believe what they want. I know what I saw. I know what I followed. I know what I stood beside when the galaxy begged not to die again. They'll never write it in history books. They'll never carve their names into stone. But if you stand in the right place, at the right time, and look toward the stars just as they start to blink again, you'll feel it. That weight, that presence, like something old is watching, something that once woke to save you, and might not do it again.